The WNBA just authorized a strike. 93% of players voted yes. Only 3 said no. And here's the thing, nobody's talking about those 3 players who voted no. They might be the only ones thinking clearly right now.
To get you guys up to speed there, 93% of the players participated in the vote. So 93% of players in the WNBA. And how many is that? Could we do the math? I believe that there's 166 WNBA players times 0.93. Is that right? So 154 players voted and 3 players. So only 3 players voted no to the authorization of a
Because while everyone's celebrating this so-called unity, I'm looking at the calendar. It's the off-season. They're not working. So what exactly are they striking from? Their couches. This is the equivalent of threatening to quit a job you don't currently have. Make it make sense, but let's back up. The WNBA Players Association just pulled the trigger on strike authorization with a vote that supposedly shows unprecedented solidarity. 154 players participated. Only 3 voted against it. The message is clear. We're ready to shut it down if we don't get what we want. Sounds powerful, right? Sounds like a united front ready to fight for their worth, except there's a massive problem with this strategy that nobody wants to acknowledge. And I'm going to say what everyone's thinking, but afraid to tweet. The strike authorization is a bluff, and the league knows it. Here's why. A strike only works when you have leverage, when you can actually hurt the other side by withholding your labor. But right now, there's no season, no games, no revenue being generated that they can threaten to stop. It's like threatening to go on a hunger strike after you've already finished dinner. The timing makes 0 sense, unless this is purely a PR move designed to pressure the league through public opinion rather than actual economic leverage. And before you come at me in the comments, I'm not saying the players don't deserve better pay. I'm not saying the league shouldn't invest more. What I'm saying is that the strategy here is questionable at best and potentially catastrophic at worst. Let's talk about those 3 players who voted no. Nobody knows who they are, but I'd bet everything they're not the stars. They're not the players with unrivaled contracts or Project B deals lined up. They're probably the middle-tier or lower-tier players who understand something critical. If there's a lockout or a strike, they're the ones who get hurt the most. Breanna Stewart and Afisa Collier, they own unrivaled. They're getting paid regardless. The top stars have overseas deals, endorsement money, alternative revenue streams. But what about player number 8 on the bench, who makes the league minimum and has no other options? What happens to her when there's no season and no paycheck? Those 3 no votes represent the players who can't afford to gamble with their careers. And honestly, they might be the only ones being realistic about what a work stoppage would actually mean.
Do wonder, with these 3 players that voted against the strike, if I were to guess, I would say that these 3 players were probably players who aren't big time players. Because if a strike or a lockout happens, it's going to hurt those middle tier and lower tier players more than it's going to hurt any of the.
Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room, conflict of interest. You've got Afisa Collier and Breanna Stewart sitting at the negotiation table as player representatives, but they also own Unrivaled, a competing league. You've got the union president who just signed with Project B, another competing league. And we're supposed to believe there's no conflict here. Think about it. If the WNBA season doesn't happen, where do fans go? Unrivaled. Project B. These alternative leagues suddenly become the only game in town. I'm not saying that's the intention, but you can't ignore the optics. It's like having restaurant owners negotiate the closure of their competition while claiming they're just fighting for worker rights. And here's the uncomfortable truth that's going to get me destroyed in the comments. The fans aren't going to follow. You think casual viewers who just discovered Caitlin Clark are going to hunt down Unrivaled games or figure out how to watch Project B? Not happening. Look at what happened with podcasting. Joe Rogan went to Spotify. Alex Cooper went to Spotify. How many casual listeners actually followed them there? A fraction. And these are massive personalities with dedicated fan bases. Now they're back on YouTube because exclusivity killed their reach. The same thing will happen with women's basketball if they fracture into competing leagues. The WNBA has spent decades building infrastructure, media deals, and visibility. You don't just replicate that overnight. Unrivaled might have funding and star power, but it doesn't have the ecosystem. Project B is still a mystery. We haven't even seen what their product looks like yet, and neither of these leagues can absorb an entire roster of WNBA players, even if they wanted to. So, when players talk about having options, about being able to play elsewhere if the WNBA doesn't meet their demands, they're overestimating their leverage. Because the harsh reality is this: if there's number 2026 WNBA season, the league loses, but the players lose more.
The viewers are not going to follow. They're truly not going to follow. I think it would absolutely be catastrophic if they don't play a 2026 season. Just look at like podcasting, for example, when like Joe Rogan or Alex Cooper went to Spotify and how many people went over.
The league can wait. It's weathered financial losses before. It has the NBA backing it. It can absorb a year without basketball and come back. But can the players, can they afford to lose a full season of salary, exposure, and career progression? Can they afford to watch their hard-earned momentum from last season evaporate while fans move on to the next thing? Here's what the league said in response to the strike authorization, and pay attention, because this is important. They called out the union for fundamentally misrepresenting the negotiations. They said they're offering significant immediate salary increases with a new uncapped revenue sharing model. Uncapped. That means as revenue grows, player salaries grow automatically with no ceiling, but the union keeps saying the offers are a slap in the face, that the league is putting lipstick on a pig. So, who's telling the truth? Is the league actually offering substantial improvements and the union is holding out for an unrealistic deal? Or is the league lowballing and trying to spin it as generosity? The problem is we don't know. Because these negotiations are happening behind closed doors, and both sides are playing the PR game. But here's what we do know. The league's public statements have been more measured, more professional. Meanwhile, the union has been throwing around phrases like slap in the face and organizing strike votes that feel more like media spectacles than serious negotiating tactics. And then there's Caitlin Clark. She came out and basically said, "We need to compromise and get back on the court." She wasn't anti-UN. She wasn't breaking ranks. She was being realistic. She understands that missing a season would be devastating for everyone involved. But WNBA Twitter went after her anyway, because apparently wanting to actually play basketball in 2026 makes you a scab. Now, Nenica Omik said something similar. She wants a good deal, but she also wants a season. She understands they need to put the product on the court for it to be valued. That's not controversial. That's common sense. But when the narrative is all about unity and fighting the system, anyone who suggests moderation gets painted as weak or disloyal. Here's my prediction, and you can clip this and roast me later if I'm wrong. They get a deal done. It won't be the 30% revenue split the union keeps demanding. The league isn't budging on that. But salaries will increase significantly, maybe more than expected, and that'll be the compromise. The union saves face by saying they fought hard and won substantial gains. The league saves face by maintaining their revenue model. Everyone declares victory, and we get a season, but the damage is already done. The public bickering, the strike authorization, the conflict of interest allegations, it's all left a bad taste. Fans are tired of hearing about CBA negotiations when they just want to watch basketball. Casual viewers who tuned in for the first time last season because of Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese don't care about revenue splits and collective bargaining. They just want to know if there's going to be games to watch, and if this drags on past January 9th, if we actually hit a lockout or strike, I genuinely believe it could set the league back years. Not because the players don't deserve more, but because momentum in sports is everything. The WNBA finally had mainstream attention, finally had cultural relevance, finally had viewership numbers that made advertisers pay attention. You don't risk that over a negotiation when compromise is possible. The three players who voted no understand this. They understand that sometimes winning means knowing when to take the deal on the table rather than gambling everything on a better offer that might never come. They understand that the perfect can be the enemy of the good, but they're being drowned out by the 93%. Who voted yes, by the PR machinery of the union, by the narrative that any compromise is weakness. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they hold out and get everything they're asking for and it all works out perfectly. But I doubt it, because at the end of the day, this isn't about right or wrong. It's about leverage, and right now, despite what the strike authorization suggests, the players have less of it than they think. The league knows they won't actually strike during the off-season because there's nothing to strike from. The league knows alternative leagues can't replace the WNBA. The league knows fans won't follow a fractured product. So, what's the endgame here? Either the union is playing hardball and will eventually compromise, or they're genuinely prepared to blow up the 2026 season over demands they might not get. And if it's the latter, if they actually let this go to a work stoppage, then everyone loses. The players, the league, the fans, and most importantly, the sport itself. I hope I'm wrong. I hope they get a deal done soon. I hope we're all watching WNBA basketball next season, and this is just a footnote in the history of the league's growth. But right now, with the January 9th deadline looming and both sides dug in, I'm not optimistic. So, let me know in the comments. Do you think the players should hold out for 30% revenue sharing, even if it risks the season? Or should they take the deal on the table and get back to basketball? Because this is the conversation nobody wants to have, but everyone needs to. The stakes are too high to pretend everything's going to work out just because we want it to, and while we're talking about high stakes, let's pivot to something actually happening. Christmas Day NBA games. Because unlike the WNBA, the NBA is actually playing basketball right now. Shocking concept, I know. Cleveland versus New York. Cleveland's been struggling lately, so I'm taking the Knicks. They're riding high right now, and this feels like their game to lose. Plus, home court advantage at Madison Square Garden on Christmas. That's Knicks territory. San Antonio versus Oklahoma City. The Thunder want revenge after losing to the Spurs earlier. This is at OKC. Normally, I'd take the Thunder easily, but I'm going chaos mode. Give me the Spurs back-to-back against OKC just for the plot. Wembanyama on Christmas in a revenge game setting. That's must-see TV. Dallas at Golden State. Warriors at home. They're taking this one. Steph Curry on Christmas Day is basically a guaranteed show. Dallas is good, but Golden State in that building with that atmosphere. Warriors win. Houston versus Lakers. This one's tricky. Houston's tough, but they just lost to Sacramento. Lakers at home on Christmas with LeBron. I'm taking LA. They'll find a way to pull it off for the holiday crowd. Minnesota at Denver. Am I really about to predict a home sweep except for San Antonio? Yes. Yes, I am. Give me Minnesota. They just beat OKC. Anthony Edwards lives for big games and enemy territory. Timberwolves for the upset. There you have it. Clip it, save it. Roast me on the 26th if I'm wrong. But unlike the WNBA situation, at least we know these games are actually happening. At least we know we're getting basketball on Christmas Day. That's the difference between a league that's functioning and one that's threatening to shut itself down over negotiations that should have been settled months ago. The WNBA has one more chance to get this right before January 9th. After that, we're either getting a deal or we're getting chaos. And if it's chaos, remember who pushed for it and who tried to compromise. Remember who prioritized basketball and who prioritized posturing, because at the end of the day, fans don't care about CBA details. They care about watching the game. And if you take that away from them during the league's biggest growth period in history, don't be surprised when they don't come back. That's all I've got. Drop your thoughts below. Are the players right to authorize a strike, or are they overplaying their hand? Let's talk about it. And for everyone celebrating the holidays this week, enjoy your family, enjoy your friends, and let's hope by the time we get to January, we have good news about the WNBA season instead of more drama.